Today we have a special Blaze News The Mandate. Our Matthew Peterson had the opportunity to sit down with Ryan Williams. He's the president of Claremont Institute. So they dive into everything. They go through the rise of Donald Trump to the hurdles of running a think tank in the Joe Biden world, the post-2020 landscape, and what a second Trump victory looks like.
20
years now.
Yeah.
It hurts.
Time flies.
It hurts. That is long, but we should say a little bit about how we met. We were in grad school studying great books at Claremont. And I guess I was a few years before you there.
Yeah.
And you came in 20 years ago.
Yeah. August of 2005.
Yeah.
Wild. Almost 20 years.
And over that time, there's been, a ton of overlap, right? We went to grad school together, we took classes together, had many of the same professors. But we should talk a little bit about how you got to Claremont.
Yeah.
Your origin story.
Yeah, born in Los Angeles, but we moved to San Diego when I was young, 6 years old. But I'm one of these weird kids who only applied to one college, and that was Hillsdale College. Studied economics and political science there, and I started there. The weird sort of Claremont overlap is that the year I started at Hillsdale, 2000, was the year that Larry Arnn had taken over Hillsdale, leaving the presidency at the Claremont Institute. So that was my first acknowledgement of Claremont's existence. The Claremont Review books was floating around all the political faculty offices, and Hillsdale. I was kind of a snot-nosed libertarian back then, and Hillsdale taught me prudence.
It is. It was sort of fate, though, right? That Larry Arnn leaves his post at the Claremont Institute, of which you become president.
Yeah.
Yet you spend that time at Hillsdale, and Hillsdale, of course, as I think our audience well knows, is one of the only centers in America where you can actually study the truth about American history and American civilization. So you're there early on. You learn about Claremont from that, really, from the president being from Claremont, seeing the Claremont Review of Books, et cetera.
Yeah, and then I graduate 2004 and immediately do a Publius Fellowship at the Claremont Institute, our oldest fellowship, founded when we were in 1979. Got introduced to all those folks, and then took a year off, wasn't quite sure if I wanted to do law school or graduate school. So I chose the less practical route, grad school, and that's where you and I met.
Yes, I had the same experience, by the way. I was going to go to law school. There was a law school that was giving me a full ride, and it had a tag, right, that was there at orientation with my name. That's how close I was to going instead of
closer
Claremont.
than me. Yeah.
And a friend like brought me my name tag from that law school, but instead we go to Claremont Graduate University, where we should tell people what we learned and studied.
Yeah, the track that like-minded folks like us tend to go through at Claremont Graduate University is American politics and political philosophy. So we took courses from Charles Kessler and Mark Blitz, and some of these names won't be household names, but really some of the best teachers of American political thought and political thought more generally in the country. That still remains the case. Some of them have retired, but Blitz is still teaching, Kessler's still teaching. And it was this wonderful mix of how to think seriously about America, but also how to understand America in the context of the West and the history of thought in the West. So, it's the best political education I've ever got. Hillsdale was great too. It's just in grad school you get to go a little deeper.
Yeah. I as I get older, I think about how lucky and how grateful I am for that education, because as you and I both know and suffered through after we left grad school, the entire educational system is so desiccated, right, so far gone. The program that we were in, actually, which the audience should know, is basically gone. It's been eradicated. So there's very few places where you can actually study political philosophy done right, and the actual history and the American idea.
Yeah, there's maybe 4 or 5 grad schools in the country that are decent these days on these questions, and one of them is Hillsdale, and it didn't exist in 2005. They had to found it in the meantime. So
we're there, Claremont Graduate University, and a lot of us we knew about the Claremont Institute, which was separate from the university, but founded really by students of Harry Jaffa, who is a great teacher of American thought and more. but-
and was still alive when we were there.
yes, someone that we interacted
Still
with. quite a
raring to
bit.
go at 88 years old. Yeah.
And this was a guy who loved his students. He might have been belligerent towards other scholars and liked to get into really good kinds of fights intellectually. But I mean, it's such a great teacher.
Oh yeah.
Such a great teacher.
Yeah, he used to, when I worked at the Claremont Institute, he had an office downstairs, and he'd call me randomly, and you'd always hear, "What ho, Ryan?" That's what Jaffa would say.
Yes.
And then he'd either lambaste me for something we were doing wrong or just talk about politics in general, but it was always good-natured.
What was your first role at the Claremont Institute?
I was just a research assistant when I came out for graduate school. That's when you and I met. You were doing writing and sort of higher level stuff there. And then before I knew it, I was assistant director of programs. And then after coursework, running all our programs, chief operating officer a few years after that. And then I think 3 or 4 years after that, 2017 now, took over as president in 2017, September.
So before we get into your history as president in the Trump years, just say a little bit about what the Claremont Institute is and has traditionally done.
Yeah, so you mentioned it was founded by some graduate students in 1979, so the last year of the Carter administration. They were worried about stagflation and effectless foreign policy. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's sort of like the Biden years.
More things change.
Yeah, and they were they wanted to teach the conservative movement about America. They thought libertarianism had its uses, traditionalism, Christian traditionalism was fine too, but they thought that the perspective of the founders, which was a distinctly American conservatism, was missing from all this. So that was really the goal. And they started out by teaching young writers who were writing for the public prints, as we used to say, across America. And so that teaching was always at our core at Claremont. Giving everyone the civics education and the grounding in the American founding they should have gotten or used to get in high school and college, but never get anymore. And since then, we've done a lot more teaching, law students, mid-career folks, sheriffs now, speechwriters, all sorts of summer teaching programs. And then we publish a magazine, the Claremont Review of Books, quarterly. We have an online publication, The American Mind, which actually you founded, and at the Claremont Institute. And for the last 4 years or so, we've been doing a lot more in Washington, D.C. with our Center for the American Way of Life and around the states. So we're really, we always wanted to be upstream from a lot of the things going on in D.C., teaching the teachers, teaching the policymakers, taking them and giving them the finishing school in how to understand America. So we've now got over 1,000 alumni. 50 of them are, 50 give or take change, are in the Trump administration. So that's, we teach, we write, and we try to lead.
So we're going to talk about that influence. We're going to lead up to that influence in a bit, but I'm glad you mentioned it now at the outset, because it's important for people to realize, if you look up the Claremont Institute in the press, right, you're going to see a lot of just the right kind of haters, right? To the point where you had people write a cover calling the Claremont Institute Trump's brain in the first administration, every slur in the book since, right? But to explain how you got there, we have to go back to you taking over the presidency and becoming president of the Claremont Institute in the midst of probably the most turbulent time, for the right in living memory, really, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And that is right as Trump was coming up. And remember at the time, especially in the audience, it seems everyone knows they're MAGA now, but that was not clear. People didn't know who Trump was, and there was a contentious debate going on within and without Claremont all over the right, I think right as you ascended to the presidency.
Yeah, we've been writing about it some. I mean, famously, Mike Anton published the Flight 93 election 18 months before I took over. But yeah, we appreciated in Trump. We'd been waiting for someone like Trump for a long time, in the sense that he was not of Washington, D.C. He wanted to bring a practical view of things to national government after decades, really almost a century, of thinking about government in a very technocratic and quote-unquote scientific way, sort of the wages of the progressive movement. And he wanted to come in and thought the bureaucracy was a problem. He thought endless foreign wars were dumb. And he thought that the immigration crisis and trade needed some adjustments. So he basically took up the issues that the Republican grassroots had cared about for 20 years. And he did the most radical thing ever, which is campaign on those issues and win the presidency on those issues, and then try to do something about them.
So I remember coming, I guess, in 2018, right?
Yeah.
to work for you at the Claremont Institute as Vice President of Education, and in being excited about it, because I didn't really want to go back to a think tank, but the way you described it, what you were doing, was appealing, let's say.
Yeah.
And I remember coming in and you said something like, "Welcome to the revolution," and shook my hand, and it was fast movement ever after. But I think what we need to explain to a lot of people out there is why, because the rest of the institutional right was basically anti-Trump, or they had very deep suspicions. And there's an interesting question here as to why Claremont, which is in a way like not involved in policy, right? It's more teaching. It wasn't in DC at the time. And so what makes Claremont so special that for somehow these egghead scholars, right, that we I guess we are to some degree and we all study with, understood MAGA from the beginning?
It was two things. We were out in California, so we had seen America's blue future, and it was grim. And so we had a more acute sense of the crisis on our hands. We'd also been studying for a long time and writing about basically 100 years of progressivism, the colonization of national government by the bureaucracy, the increasingly tenuous connection between the people, their representatives, and what government did every day. And Trump seemed to understand that instinctually. He thought it was crazy. He wanted to, in a way, get back to an older way of politics, a more political way of politics, if I can put it that way. And scholars, friends of ours like John Marini, have been writing about this for years. You needed someone who was completely outside that system, who could tap into this discontent with the American people and run with it. Also, we a lot of our friends, I know like a bunch of lawyer friends who are cruise people in Newport Beach, they thought, he's just going to betray us. The judges will be bad. He's just going to, he's conning us. And my point always to them in private was, happy to be vindicated, was, look, I mean, this is politics. I mean, he's gonna dance with the girl that brought him. So what are you guys talking about? And so understanding the possible revolutionary quality in the good sense of Trump and the movement he represented, in a way, a kind of second Reagan revolution, which Reagan admitted was a failure in his farewell address. He didn't quite do what he came to do. And I think Trump picked that mantle back up in different ways because it was 30 years later, but that's what we saw in Trump.
Is it fair to say that part of what you're talking about is the fact that because Claremont had such a deep study, right, going on for decades of American political thought and what had happened with 100 years of progressive era, that the Claremont scholars and associated, fellows who were out there doing things, but educated by Claremont, they just had a stronger sense. And in a way, Glenn Beck picked this up, right? When he talked about Woodrow Wilson, R.J. Pistrito, another Claremont associated fellow, his book about progressivism, was it 10 plus years ago, 15 years ago. The fact that from Woodrow Wilson and even before him on, you have this 100-year thing going on where there's basically a decline or corruption. So the Claremont case was an understanding that we are really in a bad state, or the Constitution's been beaten, out of form. And I mean, do you think that's true? And that enabled then the understanding that actually Trump may be Godzilla in Washington, D.C., but when there's these other monsters to fight, Godzilla may be exactly what we need. Yeah,
and also the sense in which Republicans had been fighting an asymmetric war, not in their favor for a long time, because the disproportionate political disposition, to say the least, of the national bureaucratic and NGO establishment was 80-90% Democrat. So when Democrats came into the presidency, they were pushing on open doors. When Republicans came in, take your pick and take your pick of your scandal. Nixon, Reagan, Bush. I mean, they basically, the modern progressive Democrats, and that would include, I think, the mainstream Democrats on the left, basically thought that every president since Richard Nixon, Republican, was illegitimate, in some sense or fashion. So it was nothing new for us to have them say that about Trump.
Right. Well, okay, so let's go back to then taking on the presidency then. I mean, what were your thoughts coming into that role and looking at the scene when you did have a lot of contention about Trump, and Claremont was clearly navigating in the direction of, no, there's something real here, and this is someone who is moving in the right direction?
Yeah, it was, well, first of all, it's to maintain, one of the challenges to maintain our feet firmly planted in our roots. That is to say, our teaching and scholarly project. But at the same time, to realize, and the DC Center is a good example of this, we needed to be more overtly political in the best sense of that term. So navigating that while taking fire from the more establishment right and never Trump right, while also trying to fend off the left, who considered Trump back then, and really even they basically considered Claremont this way. Going back to the Reagan administration, it's just our profile had grown much more prominent nationally. They think the whole project is illegitimate. It's somehow crypto authoritarianism or illiberalism or anything like that. So doing our best to present public arguments that no, actually this is quite American. It's just we've been warped for 100 years with a different sort of anti-constitutional way of doing government. So, striking that balance between a think tank that does scholarly work and teaching, while also acknowledging, especially to potential supporters, that we're not all just in the classroom all day.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And even at the time, there were Claremont people within that first Trump administration, notably friend and colleague Mike Lanton, who had written the Flight 93 essay. That I remember when I read that, I thought, I didn't even know him at the time at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you and others did, but I remember reading this, and it made the argument pro-Trump in such a strong way. Rush Limbaugh read it for his entire show on air. I read it, and I was thinking, who is this guy? I want to meet him because I agree with this.
Yeah.
And that was, that was just one sign that many of these people would end up within the administration, which they did. But outside the administration, in Trump 1.0 world, right? There were a couple stands that really stick out in my mind that you made, that Claremont made, that we were all part of, that were bold at the time, and now everybody knows.
Yeah.
I feel like now everyone acknowledges it, and it's part of Trump 2.0's agenda, right, throughout the administration.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about putting up planting that flag back in 2019.
Yeah, it's always been our view that the best trajectory for America would be to get back to the Declaration of Independence, which
shocking.
Shocking, which means, we're all free and equal in a way, equal in our rights. But the diversity of people and men means that to demand equal outcomes for every group based on their race or sexual identity is madness and can only be achieved through totalitarianism. And so the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which had the noble purpose of overturning Jim Crow, as it should have, quickly got colonized by the bureaucracy, or appropriated by the bureaucracy and the courts and the movement on the left, and quickly turned into this kind of new racial balancing system. Where you would basically based on your skin color or identity, you would get certain benefits or get certain demerits. And we thought that's no way to run a republic. It will only lead to civic strife and dissolution. So the stand-in word for all of that would be multiculturalism, which is to say all cultures it's sort of a weird mix of left-wing ideology and cultural relativism, although they certainly have their view of justice, so it's not really relativistic. But the idea that America is merely an amalgamation of different identity groups, that the government gets to manage and manage who gets what and why based on those identity groups, seemed like the most un-American thing we'd ever heard of, and precisely the thing we tried to get away from over the course of from the Civil War up until the 60s. Unfortunately, it turned in a bad direction. So a lot of the current war on woke, I think, has that as its background, or that the revulsion of that type of way of doing government.
Isn't it wild how, I remember, this coming out and, everyone working together during this time. And I remember how edgy that was. And now it seems, Chris Rufo's on Twitter every day saying, this is what we're going to do to these woke universities. Oh, look, Harvard doesn't want to accept the Civil Rights Act, right? We do have to step back. I hope you step back and think, there should be something gratifying about how that stand and that effort has turned into success really all over the place. Because, part of the point in your essay was, we need to recognize this as a regime-level threat,
right?
As you were just explaining, to the very existence of the United States of America, to the very principles of its founding. And people said, that's crazy. And now it does feel like this is a win, right?
Yeah. Well, we've been long students of progressivism, as we've talked about. But the latest iteration of it, especially after the 60s, was this new kind of racialized identity stuff. And we also had been observing in the 90s and the 2000s the insanity on campus at the studies departments. And that all spilled over on international politics right about when we wrote that essay. So now it's sort of, at the time, I think a naive reader of that would have thought, what, multiculturalism, but I like the Mexican food truck. Like, what's your problem? Why are you guys hating? But yeah, our point was it's a different way of life. It's a different way of thinking about justice, and it's not going to end well for America. So we need to start going after it.
Yeah, this isn't about food.
No, it's not.
This is about how we conceive of ourselves as citizens.
Yeah.
So another stance at that time that was, I think, striking, controversial is, and I'll never forget this, I'm very proud to have been there during this time, was when the riots were happening, the COVID lockdowns were going on. It really felt like the country was falling apart. And I remember every day thinking to myself, do never forget this. And what I don't want to forget ever is the fact that no one was standing up and saying, this is absolute bullshit. Like, this is evil, it needs to stop.
Yeah.
Very few people did. And Claremont, of course, did.
Yeah, I mean, some people said rioting's bad, but that's about as far as they got. But my chairman, Tom Klingenstein, and I decided to publish a punchy op-ed in the American Mind called "America is Not Racist," basically showing people the deep principles behind the American regime, and the fact that to call this a systemically racist society was crazy, and to burn down our cities and to reorient all of national government because of this one case of George Floyd was equally crazy and was revolutionary. I mean, we had to understand it for what it was, which was a fundamental attempt to reorder and basically deconstruct the American Constitution, with a lot of baggage before it, of course, over many decades and different organizations and the civil rights movement or certain radical aspects of it. But this was taken up as a huge opportunity for the enemies of America. And then plenty of normal people were just caught up in it and thought, racism is bad, I want to stand against it. But we want to try to explain this whole architecture, and that the real ideological drivers behind it, the activists, were not just standing up for black rights. They really wanted to reorder the country.
This, I mean, I can't help but say it again. The fact that we published you saying and Tom saying America is not racist as the title in the middle of that noise
in May.
I mean, that was right in the middle. Very few people were saying anything. They were terrified. That always stood out to me as just full confidence. This is the right thing. And history has vindicated that, I think, as well.
Mitt Romney was marching with Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
Right?
Oh yeah. Don't I remember it? I can see the video now. I don't want to. I want to black it out of my mind.
Yeah.
So you have this this really rebellion or revolution taking place in the streets. You have brown shirts marching. The left was really on the march, literally burning down police stations, defacing statues, and this all led into what Anton called the coming coup. Michael Anton in his piece in American Mind, leading into that election in 2020. And of course, the results of that election were very controversial. Claremont, Claremont, just a little bit. This really was at the ripping America apart at that time, and we sort of predicted it, right? Claremont predicted this. You were warning about what might happen, and what happened was in fact messy, right? And then you have Claremont scholars like John Eastman advising the president as well. Difference of opinions at Claremont about 2020, I'm sure, but this was something that was like the next big drama, was this heartrending and divisive 2020 result.
Yeah, I mean, what we predicted, which sort of didn't quite come to pass, but it seemed to us all the indicators were in place that if that election had gone 3 points the other way and Trump had won a squeaker, the left was not going to let him take office, or they were going to do whatever they could to not let him take office. The opposite happened, and it's not fair to say the right didn't let Biden take office. There was kind of a bit of a riot on January 6th. It certainly wasn't an insurrection, but we saw what the left was planning in a very organized way. Unlike January 6th, was sort of all levels of the democratic apparatus, from the nonprofits and the big money all the way down. They wanted to, they were fixing to make a color revolution if they had to. Now it's Biden won a squeaker, and they didn't have to, and we were pilloried for that prediction, but it seemed clear as day to us. And then, as you mentioned, my colleague John Eastman, in his sort of personal capacity as an attorney, became one of Trump's legal advisors in November, and then, of course, wrote his infamous memo in early January about Trump's options and Mike Pence's options and all that. And John has now been really outrageously and egregiously railroaded. I mean, he spent $1 million on legal defenses. California is on the final stage of trying to disbar him for merely advocating for a client, even if that client is, a controversial president. So it really seems like 10 years ago, doesn't it? It was only 4 years ago, which is wild. Now, luckily, some of the tide's turning on the lawfare, of course, with Trump trying to do a lot about it. But John's still out there fighting for his legal life, and it's his treatment has been profoundly un-American, and I think is a testament to some of the stakes we've been writing about for a long time, and the asymmetric quality of right-on-left warfare, political warfare, I should say. Yeah.
No, it really is. I mean, it's insane. He's in trouble, $1 million in legal fees, his entire career. That they've tried to destroy and certainly have derailed in many ways, all because he wrote things that Harvard professors on the other side were willing to support and push if the election had gone the other way.
And that Congress agrees with now because they revised the Electoral Count Act.
Yes, exactly. Yes, in fact, I had a conversation once, happened to have a conversation with President Trump about that, and he was saying, he was right. He was right. See what they did. They had to change the law. Trump understands that.
Yeah.
So in this period we're talking about, and everyone went through this in your personal lives out there. I mean, we all did this. That's when I said I have to move to Texas at some point. Let's call that the Gulag years. I mean, so this is a pretty dark time. Biden takes over, and now all of a sudden, Claremont is not somewhat adjacent to the administration, in a way helping shape the thought of it. Certainly people are claiming that all over the place about it, swearing up and down about its influence. Now all of a sudden, right's out of power, and we're in this dark sort of time. So what's the history at Claremont over those last 4 years?
Just trying to get people to understand the candidate who pitched himself as a return to normalcy, Biden. Either him or the people around him, and it depends on when in the administration you look at it, but it's some combo of the two. Really, we're pursuing the most radical agenda that a Democratic president probably had since the 30s. A little FDR shout out there. Very different, but radical in its own way, too. And look, I mean, everyone should go look at Tulsi Gabbard just declassified the Biden administration's implementation strategy for their countering violent extremism plan. And it was a whole of government effort to delegitimize, disarm, and basically not quite disenfranchise, but at the margins disenfranchise by putting in jail and constraining the activity of the right. And you saw it in Biden's rhetoric repeatedly, the famous, the red sermon or whatever it was from outside Independence Hall was probably the apogee of it rhetorically, and it was frightening and un-American in a way. Now, you can go back in American history and see little pieces of that. I mean, Truman at one point called his domestic enemies basically fascists. FDR liked to dabble in that too. So it's out there. It's been done before. But Biden's rhetoric about basically 70 million Americans, give or take change, seemed to us to be very alarming. To say nothing of all the kind of institutional moves that his administration were making, which were patently unconstitutional. I mean, the open border, their attempted legalization, sort of Dreamers 2 business, the debt forgiveness, all the rest. So it was progressive, programmatic liberalism at its full height, even with a slim majority and at one point a contested Congress. So we just wanted to show people how they should understand that sort of thing. It was not politics between the 40-yard lines. Much like we had been arguing at various points for the last 30 years or so, politics have been trending towards this, especially with the ascendancy and dominance of the left, a very troubling trajectory. and one not conducive to civic health or peace or constitutionalism.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, amen to that. I mean, I remember this starting in a way when we already knew that they were going to punish their opponents
Yeah.
as soon as they took power. It was clear they were going to try to jail the president, take his money, go after his family. That was already apparent. Like, we knew that was in the cards. But I remember the first sign of this for me, and I think it was forwarding you this email that we received from the Library of Congress, which said, we need to use your American Mind op-ed before January 6th, I believe, saying, like, we have to protest what's going on. It wasn't a call for violence, it was a call for protest.
Yeah.
And they said, we want to save this and document it to use it in an exhibit about January 6th.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, okay, fine, right? But there was something about that that gave you a little bit of a bone chill, where you realized exactly what they were going to do with that and how they were going to try to frame it. And then, we moved on from there to the era of everyone just believing that they were tapped, like wiretapped, right? I mean, when Tucker was, right? Many people, you can prove this, that government was actively watching people, and that was it is unbelievable that we've turned the corner on that. But I remember that being a big part of that experience. And then you should say more about what the fellowships were like during that time, because we had all these right-leaning, bright young people who cared about saving America.
Yeah.
And they didn't step down. They were not afraid.
Yeah.
They were more emboldened by what the left was doing to come to Claremont and to be in these programs.
Yeah, there was a self-selecting crew more than normal those years. I'm proud to say, I think we're the only national think tank that still had fellowships in person in 2020. In hindsight, it seems like an easy decision, but at the time it was controversial. We were a magnet for ambitious, intelligent young people who thought, like we did, that maybe they didn't quite have the full understanding of it, and we tried to help them with that, but something here is not right, and we need to all do everything we can about it. And now a lot of them are in the administration, as I said, about 50 of them, going back a couple decades worth of fellows now. So, part of our project going forward is going to be using our office in DC to do whatever we can to help them communicate, network, and be more effective than they otherwise would be, as well as, America 250 is coming up, so we've got big plans for that too. So it's a good time to be in the think tank business. From the outside, people think, well, what does a think tank do? And it's for us, it's ideas and their application to our current crisis, teaching them, writing about them, and then weaponizing them.
Yes.
To save the republic.
Well, so let's talk about this. So the win happens. I mean, and this is just as momentous as, all those big moments in the past. The biggest moment is the greatest comeback in perhaps in American political history, where everything's thrown at him. The assassination attempt occurs. He survives. He wins this election. And then all of a sudden you have 50. I mean, that's all you need to say when someone asks what a think tank does. Like, well, do you want to walk around EEOB? Do you want to walk around the Eisenhower building and shake hands with our people? Because these are all the people who are smart, who understand what's going on, or are doing things, and are part of this wave. So you have this, unlooked for a lot of people, this win, which didn't even seem possible 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
And now here you are. So, I mean, how do you look at that? How do you think about that in terms of, Claremont being in the lifeblood of the administration and these people shaping the course of the Trump administration? Yeah,
well, it's a happy coincidence that America 250 Declaration 250 is next year, because in many ways what we've been calling for a long time is a second American Revolution. Bloodless, of course, but institutionally, which is to say, to finally get a handle on the large bureaucracy that has been governing all aspects of our lives from DC in recent decades, and to return America to an older way of politics, which is popular majorities being amassed into electoral majorities, and then governing as if the people might have a say in their government, and reconstitutionalizing the administrative. Oh, you need expertise in government, sure, of course. It's a modern economy, 350 million people, but it should be controlled by constitutional officers, not bureaucrats who can never be fired, and who, as we see from USAID, there's this kind of symbiotic relationship between the bureaucratic state funding itself, funding its causes, perpetuating itself. Trump really, in many ways, Doge and everything else, Doge is part of it, but not the whole of it. Russ Vogt at OMB is another big part of it. Trying to dismantle that and reconstitutionalize it, that's revolutionary. And that would be, but we want to make the argument, and we will, that it's not some monarchic coup as the left thinks and they keep talking about with Trump. It's really a return to American first principles, and it's American as apple pie. It's just hard to think about it because we've been enmeshed in a different system for a century.
Yeah, the main people I'd love to just inject that into their brains are the quote unquote moderate Republicans in Washington, D.C. But speaking of that 250th anniversary, you need to tell us more about that, because this is sort of Claremont's moment, right? Yeah. The teachers and stewards of the Declaration and American political thought moving into the golden age of Trump, who has declared, right, a 250th almost year of Jubilee, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, we'll help the administration wherever they want us to on celebrating the founding and understanding its gravity and all that. But I want it to be, it has to be retrospective in that sense, and celebratory, and celebrate what's great about America and reinstill a kind of civic patriotism that's been lost or been forgotten. But I think more than anything, our job is to help everyone understand, both in a scholarly way, but also in making the public argument about this century-old way of doing government that needs to be dismantled. So, I mean, that needs a lot of rhetorical work. As you said, the moderate Republicans don't even know how to think about the problem of modern bureaucracy. And so they think, they think all efforts to reform it or defund it or start firing more bureaucrats, this is somehow all illegitimate. And I think it'll be our job to tell people, to connect the founding and constitutionalism to that project, and to illustrate to people that it's really a way to return control over their government to them, and really to return prosperity and flourishing to America, to make America great again.
Well, I mean, this relates to the DC Center, which people should know about, which is what started how many years ago?
2021, January is when it launched, in 2021. So yeah, our colleague Arthur Millick started it up. He's now on leave, working for Mike Anton at the State Department. Arthur and Mike are having a great time doing diplomacy and all that stuff, flying around the world. Arthur will come back at a certain point, but no, the DC Center really it had two purposes: to galvanize and inform a coalition in Washington about these problems and what to do about them. The real threats to constitutional government, not the 17 different areas of the federal budget that every other think tank does policy on, but identity politics, education policy, immigration and the border, citizenship, and all the rest. And then it's been doing a lot of work around the states too. Our colleague Scott Yenner has been going around to basically every red state that will listen, and it's a lot of them, and trying to help them think through how to get diversity, equity, and inclusion and wokeness out of their educational systems, both higher ed and K through 12. And that's very close to our hearts, as we've been in the education business for so long. So, and then, as I said, I think our focus will shift a little bit in the sense that we have a friendly administration, so we'll have lots of work to do to try to help our fellows that are in it be more effective and be more informed and get to know each other and get reminded who they all are. Because in Washington, everyone has their head down across the administration, and it's big, so bringing them together and getting them to just share information and remind each other that they're all there doing the same work will be good work to do and should have lasting effect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, before we close out today, I do really want to get your thoughts on the difference between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0 in this administration, and then what you think the main obstacles are, the main focus should be moving forward.
Yeah. The big difference is he has a loyal team for the most part. Trump 1.0, he had to rely on the establishment apparatus in many instances. I mean, the revolving door at state and defense, Mattis, Tillerson. He had a bunch of principals around him who thought it was their God-given job to control him and to prevent him from somehow destroying America, which was ridiculous. So the executive branch was very dysfunctional in the first term. Now he has a bunch of principals who know, no, we're here, we're on team, we're all trying to do the same thing, which is help Trump execute. And I think it's almost providential that he lost in 2020, because they had time to really think about this and draft up more plans. And you really have almost a new presidential term rather than a second term, which are notoriously deflating and deflated, as they're kind of lame ducks out the gate, and they're often not that great. But he got new energy, and the people around him got new energy, and they had more time to figure out who all their friends were, and to do the intellectual work and policy work that they didn't have leading into the first administration. So they're more prepared, they're better equipped personnel-wise, and in a way, Trump, just by a matter of time, I mean, people wouldn't think it from the media's reaction to Trump, but just as a matter of time, the country's been more socialized to Trump and MAGA and him being in the presidency. So it's a little easier to operate, even though the epithets and the heated rhetoric are nonstop from the other side.
Okay, I lied about that being last question.
Okay.
That is that's very well said. I think we need an answer to this question, which is something I think about a lot and I just enjoy, and that's this. Yeah, over the last however many years, many smart people on the left have attacked the Claremont Institute in all kinds of crazy ways. And it's a badge of honor for you and everyone who's really part of the Institute. No one cares. No one is, they just see the great, over the target. But the odd thing also is that Claremont doesn't, and I'll say this because I can, Claremont doesn't care, like a lot of other think tanks, about all the stupid marketing and the cheesy sort of like, save America, I'm going to send you a text, give us $5.
Oh, yeah.
Claremont has never done that kind of thing. It works in a very high-minded way. Yeah. And you yourself and so many others associated are not, most of these sociopaths in Washington, D.C., trying to become influencers, and trying to get your face on camera all the time, or talking in bombastic tones, right? I mean, anyone who's watching this interview can hear Ryan Williams' measured tones. So what's interesting to me is why don't more people understand the influence of Claremont, or is it Claremont's sort of spirit always to just stay under the radar?
Well, you can sometimes be more effective if people don't see you as a threat, but I think those days are over for us. It's I want to tell the left maybe they'll stop attacking us and we'll just take up less time defending ourselves. I mean, every time you write a hit piece about us being the nerve center of the intellectual right, I just fundraise off of it for months and years. And there's this caricature, I think, on the Never Trump right and even on the left that somehow we sold our souls to back Trump so that we could get fame and glory. Whereas if you look at
tell me about that in 2020, buddy.
Yeah, I know. So exactly. I mean, we took a big risk because we believed in it, not because we thought it would make us rich. I mean, we've grown in recent years, but we did it always by amassing supporters who, our best supporters and our biggest major supporters, always fall in love with the ideas of the place and its strong sense of principle and its love of America and its founding principles. And then then we have arguments about how best to apply those in turbulent times, but that's still the core of what we've always done. And we've grown, but we're still not a $100 million think tank bestriding DC. We're doing our work quietly in many respects, but I think we've justly gotten ourselves a little more recognition, and our people are more places than they have been before. So all we got to do now is just keep getting to work.
I can't even imagine what you would do with $100 million, given where you are now. People would spend $100 million to have 50 people of this caliber in an administration.
Yeah.
It really is remarkable. And I appreciate everything that you've done over these years. And I think that story of you leading Claremont and what Claremont has done is dovetails with the story of the Trump administration itself. And I hope it keeps going for a long time yet.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Matt.
Well, that was such a great conversation there. And Matthew Peterson joins me now. So you used to work with Ryan over there at the Claremont Institute. It's amazing all the things that they're doing over there. And still, how much is left to do?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I can't even say enough about, I mean, you could write books about all the things we did, right? Behind the scenes, in that first administration, and just on the right generally, and right-leaning media, these were heady times. It was really putting together the entire new right you see now. I mean, we were just a part of that, obviously, but that we were a part of it, and there was a lot going on. I mean, the kind of good conspiracies, as I call them, I used to call them woke conspiracies in an ironic way, that we would be working with different people to change policy, change things on the right, make sure the right people are in the right position. It's astounding to me that people don't realize the extent of the influence that Claremont has had, which is kind of a good thing, because they can fly a little bit under the radar. But as he said, right, that has led to the fact that they have at least 50 people that you know about in the administration now. And, they've really accomplished a lot, but there's a lot more to do.
Well, and we're going to be heading back to Washington, D.C. We're going to see some of the people there in the administration, and just the excitement that is there in Washington, D.C. right now, and the conservatives that are taking over everything.
Yeah, and the exciting thing is, I think that one of the things that we would teach in the fellowship programs is what the challenge is, right? How difficult this is. You can't just go in and change everything. How entrenched the administrative state is, and how you really need to have experience or talk to people with experience to know how to move the dials, right? And so I feel very confident that a lot of these people who are in there, they're committed fighters. They don't care about the uniparty or anything else, and B, they're knowledgeable about not just the goal, but about how to get there. And that's what's so exciting. But because this is not like a simple formula, right? It's not just like, no one actually knows how to do this because we haven't done it yet. No one has reformed the federal government and the administrative state in the post-World War II era. Not a single Republican president has been successful. But if we are going to be successful, this crew, this administration is the time to do it.
Well, this is the reason that we have the mandate for you. This is the reason that we're trying to go through and highlight something, because it's never been done before. It is the great unknown. It is something that is worthy of fighting for and putting this in the hands of people that know how to do it. So thanks for you and Ryan for that great conversation.
Yeah, I hope to have a lot more. I talked to Ryan a bit. He's a great guy. He means what he says, and thank God they're out there.
All right, we'll see you back here from Washington, D.C. tomorrow.